The ceremony was just ending when I heard it. "What a disappointment," my father muttered, not quite under his breath. I stood frozen in my graduation gown, diploma case still warm in my hand, as he turned to my mother with that familiar look of disdain. 4 years of college just to end up working at some startup nobody's heard of. They didn't know the man standing behind them had heard every word. They didn't know he was about to extend his hand and say, "Actually, I'm Alex Mercer, CEO of that startup nobody's heard of. And your daughter is the most promising analyst I've ever hired." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Mia Chen. I'm 26 years old. I work as a data analyst at Vertex Analytics in Seattle, Washington. I'm someone who color codes her calendar, apologizes when someone bumps into me, and still uses bookmarks from elementary school because throwing them away feels like betraying a memory. That graduation day wasn't supposed to be another battlefield. It was supposed to be a celebration. But standing there, watching my father's face shift from dismissal to discomfort as my boss introduced himself, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because I had spent my entire life trying to earn the approval of someone who had already decided, long before I was born, that I would never be enough. Why would a daughter let her parents believe she was failing, only to reveal her success in such a public way? That's what they'll ask. That's what I used to ask myself. But if you stay with me, I'll tell you what they don't know. And by the end, you might understand why sometimes the only victory is walking away from a game you were never meant to win. I grew up in a split-level house with faded blue siding in a suburb outside Portland. My father, Richard Chen, managed a regional bank branch with mechanical precision. Every evening, he'd come home with the same disappointed sigh, as if the mere existence of a family waiting for him was an inconvenience he couldn't quite shake. "I could have been regional director by now if I'd focused on my career," he'd say. Eyes sliding past me to some alternate reality where his life had taken a different turn. My mother, Diane Chen, lived in his shadow, organizing her entire existence around his moods. She was always the first to notice when his coffee was getting low, when his newspaper was folded incorrectly, when I was being too loud or too quiet or too present. "Your father works so hard," she'd whisper whenever I questioned anything. "The least we can do is make things easy for him." They never hit me. They never called me names directly. But their disappointment hung in the air like a persistent fog, seeping into every corner of our home. Nothing I achieved was ever quite enough. An A was met with, "Why not an A?" Captain of the debate team prompted, "But are you going to nationals?" First chair violin warranted, Harvard doesn't care about orchestra. Each accomplishment came with an invisible asterisk, a footnote that read, "Still not enough." By 16, I had internalized their metrics of success. Straight A's, prestigious extracurriculars, perfect SAT scores, these weren't achievements to celebrate but minimum requirements to avoid disapproval. I became a machine, optimized for their validation, running on the fumes of, "maybe this time they'll be proud." And then there was my Uncle David, my mother's brother. He owned a bookstore in downtown Portland, filled with mismatched chairs and the scent of coffee and old paper. Every other Saturday, I'd take the bus downtown and spend hours among the shelves, reading whatever caught my interest. He never asked about my grades or college applications. Instead, he'd ask, "What excited you this week, Mia? What made you think?" In his cluttered back office with its wall of Polaroid photos and string lights, I wasn't the Chen family's investment. I wasn't a future resume or a GPA. I was just Mia, curious, thoughtful, still figuring things out. And somewhere between. The poetry readings he hosted on Thursday nights and the mug of hot chocolate he'd slide across the counter without asking, he planted something rare and precious, the radical idea that I might be valuable just as I was. When I scored a perfect 1600 on my SATs, my father nodded once and said, "Well, that's what we expected." When I told Uncle David, he picked me up in a bear hug that smelled like cinnamon and old books, and said, "I'm not surprised, but I'm still amazed by you, kid." I applied to 15 colleges, all my father's choices. Ivy Leagues, prestigious state schools, names that would look good on our family Christmas letter. But secretly, on a rainy afternoon in Uncle David's office, I applied to one more, Westridge University, known for its innovative computer science program and project-based learning. "It's where you come alive when you talk about it," Uncle David said, helping me with the application fee. "That matters more than any ranking." When the acceptance letters came, my father spread them across the dining table like playing cards. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, a royal flush of prestige. I knew you could do it if you applied yourself, he said, the closest thing to praise I'd ever received. We'll consider Harvard and Stanford. The others are backups. I didn't tell him about Westridge. Not yet. But that night, I called Uncle David. I got into all of them, I whispered, sitting on the floor of my closet where my parents wouldn't hear. But I only want Westridge. Then that's your answer, he said simply. Your life isn't a democracy where your parents get a vote. It's a kingdom where you wear the crown. I didn't feel like royalty when I finally told them. My father's face turned the color of concrete. My mother's hands fluttered to her throat like wounded birds. You want to throw away Harvard for some glorified technical school? My father's voice was dangerously quiet. After everything we've invested in you? It's a top program for what I want to study, I tried to explain. Their graduates are innovating in, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Their graduates aren't running Fortune 500 companies. He cut me off. Their graduates aren't sitting on federal benches or leading hospital departments. Richard, my mother attempted, but he silenced her with a look. If you choose this path, you do it without our support. His words fell like stones. No tuition, no housing, no expenses. You want to disappoint us? Do it on your own dime. I thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. That night, I sat on my perfectly made bed in my perfectly decorated room and realized that at 18, I had never made a decision that truly defied them. I had hidden my rebellions in the margins, books read in secret, opinions kept private. Dreams folded away like origami animals too delicate for rough handling. But this wasn't a small choice. This was the scaffolding for my entire future. I called Uncle David again. They're cutting me off if I go to Westridge. The pause on the other end lasted just long enough for my stomach to drop. Then, my spare room has always been yours, Mia. And the bookstore always needs help. We'll figure it out. 2 days later, I accepted Westridge's offer. The same day, I packed 2 suitcases with only what mattered most, books, photos, the violin I'd played since childhood, clothes that felt like me rather than the polished version my parents preferred. My mother cried silently in the doorway as I carried them to my car. My father didn't come home from work to see me off. He'll come around, she whispered, pressing $300 into my hand. Just give him time. I didn't believe her, but I nodded anyway. Some lies are kindnesses we allow each other. Uncle David's spare room was small but bright, with a desk beneath the window and walls painted a soft blue. It's not much, he said, helping me carry in my bags. It's perfect, I answered, and meant it. The first semester was brutal. I worked 30 hours a week at the bookstore, took a full course load, and picked up odd jobs, tutoring, dog walking, data entry, whenever I could. I lived on ramen and coffee, slept 5 hours a night, and cried in the shower where no one could hear me. But in the classroom, something miraculous happened. I fell in love with learning again. Without my parents' expectations narrowing my vision, I discovered I had a natural talent for data analysis and visualization. I could see patterns others missed, could translate complex information into stories anyone could understand. For the first time, I studied not to earn approval but because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. My professors noticed. Especially Dr. Kaminsky, who taught advanced data structures and had a reputation for being impossible to impress. After I presented a particularly innovative project, she kept me after class. You have a gift, Miss Chen, she said, peering at me over her wire-rimmed glasses. But you're working too many hours. Your exhaustion shows in your code. I started to apologize, but she held up a hand. I'm not criticizing. I'm offering a solution. My colleague at Vertex Analytics needs a part-time research assistant. It pays better than the bookstore, offers flexible hours, and would give you relevant experience. I've recommended you. That's how, in my sophomore year, I met Alex Mercer. He wasn't CEO then, just the head of research at a promising startup. Tall, with curly hair that never stayed in place and a habit of getting so excited about data that he'd forget to finish his sentences. He interviewed me in a conference room with glass walls, surrounded by whiteboards covered in equations and sticky notes. Dr. Kaminsky says you're brilliant, he said without preamble. Show me. He pushed a laptop toward me with a dataset I'd never seen before. Tell me what you see. For 3 hours, I analyzed, questioned, visualized, and presented findings. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. You found correlations our team missed after 2 weeks of analysis, he finally said. When can you start? The job changed everything. Suddenly, I could afford an apartment near campus. I could focus on my studies. I could breathe. Uncle David helped me move, hanging string lights in my tiny kitchen and stocking my fridge with actual vegetables. I'm proud of you, he said, hugging me goodbye. Not because of the job or the grades, but because you're building a life that feels true. My parents and I settled into a strained détente. Holiday dinners. Occasional phone calls that never went deeper than weather and headlines. They didn't ask about my studies or my job, and I didn't volunteer the information. It was easier that way, stepping carefully around the elephant in the room. I had defied them and was thriving anyway. By senior year, I was working at Vertex. Nearly full-time while finishing my degree. Alex had become not just my boss but my mentor. You're going to run your own team someday, he told me after I orchestrated a particularly successful project. Maybe this one. I laughed it off, but secretly, I was beginning to believe in possibilities I'd never dared consider before. 2 weeks before graduation, Alex called me into his office. I have news, he said, practically bouncing with excitement. We just secured Series B funding. $20 million. And the board approved my proposal to create a new data intelligence division. That's amazing, I said, genuinely thrilled for him. I want you to lead it, he continued, sliding a folder across the desk. Full benefits, equity package, salary that will make your student loans disappear much faster than you planned. But only if you want it. I stared at the offer letter, at the salary figure that contained an extra digit than I'd expected. Why me? I'm just graduating. There have to be more qualified. There aren't, he interrupted. I've worked with data scientists with 20 years of experience who don't have your insight or creativity. You've been doing the work already. Now I want to give you the title and compensation you deserve. I took the folder home to my apartment, sat cross-legged on my bed, and called Uncle David. They offered me a director position, I said, still not quite believing it. With a team and everything. His whoop of joy was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Are you going to tell your parents? He asked once he'd calmed down. I hadn't decided yet. Part of me wanted to share this victory, to finally prove I'd made the right choice. Another part knew that no achievement would ever be enough to change their fundamental disappointment in me. Maybe after graduation, I said finally. One battle at a time. But I underestimated how quickly news travels. Vertex's funding round made the business section of several tech publications. My promotion was mentioned in 2 of them. Not prominently, just my name in a paragraph about the company's expansion plans, but it was there. The day before graduation, my phone rang with my father's number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Were you planning to tell us about this job? No greeting, no preamble. Yes, after graduation. How did you? Your aunt saw it in some technology newsletter. Had to hear about my own daughter's career from my sister-in-law. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. So this is why you defied us? You had this planned all along? No, Dad, I just, save it for tomorrow. We'll be there at 10. He hung up before I could respond. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, rehearsing explanations, defenses, anything that might bridge the chasm between us. By morning, I'd settled on honesty. I would tell them everything, the struggle, the discovery, the joy I'd found in charting my own path. Maybe, finally, they would see me. The graduation ceremony was a blur of speeches and cheers. I scanned the audience until I found them, my mother in a blue dress, my father in his charcoal suit, both looking uncomfortable among the more casually dressed families. 3 rows behind them sat Uncle David, grinning broadly beside Alex, who had insisted on coming to cheer on his newest director. Afterward, in the chaos of graduates finding families, I made my way toward my parents. Before I could reach them, I heard my father's voice, sharp with disdain. What a disappointment. 4 years of college just to end up working at some startup nobody's heard of. I froze, diploma case clutched to my chest, cap slightly askew. All my carefully prepared words evaporated like morning dew. For years of independence, of hard work, of building something meaningful, and still, I was a disappointment. Then Alex was there, extending his hand to my father with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Actually, I'm Alex Mercer, CEO of that startup nobody's heard of. And your daughter is the most promising analyst I've ever hired. That's why. I just promoted her to Director of Data Intelligence. At 26, she'll be the youngest executive in our company's history. My father's hand rose automatically to shake Alex's, his face a mask of confusion. My mother's eyes darted between us, trying to process this new information. In fact, Alex continued, his voice pleasant but firm, we just closed a $20 million funding round, and your daughter's work was instrumental in securing that investment. We've been featured in TechCrunch twice this month. Hardly nobody's heard of us. Uncle David appeared at my elbow, squeezing my shoulder in silent support. The tableau held for a moment, my boss defending my honor, my uncle standing beside me, my parents caught in their own false narrative. Then my father did what he always did when confronted with evidence that contradicted his worldview, he attacked. If she's so valuable, why didn't she tell us about this promotion? Why keep secrets unless there's something to hide? I found my voice at last. I was going to tell you today. I wanted to share good news on a happy occasion. The words came out steadier than I felt. But I realize now it wouldn't have mattered what I achieved or where. You decided long ago that any path but yours was a failure. We wanted what was best for you, my mother interjected, her hands twisting her purse strap. Harvard would have given you connections, prestige. Harvard would have given me debt and a degree I didn't want, I corrected gently. This path gave me purpose and people who believe in me. I glanced at Alex and Uncle David. People who see me for who I am, not who they wanted me to be. My father's jaw worked, his eyes hard. So this is your choice? This company over your family? No, Dad, I said quietly. My choice was myself. My happiness. My future. The company is just where I happen to excel. I took a deep breath. And you're still my family, if you want to be. But only if you can accept that I'm not a disappointment. I'm just different from what you planned. The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Finally, my father nodded once, sharply. Congratulations on your graduation, he said formally. We should go, Diane. Traffic will be bad. He turned and walked away without another word. My mother hesitated, squeezed my hand briefly, and followed. I watched them disappear into the crowd, a strange lightness spreading through my chest. Not happiness, exactly, but something adjacent to it. Freedom, perhaps. Well, said Uncle David after a moment, that could have gone worse. Alex looked mortified. Mia, I am so sorry. I overheard what he said, and I couldn't let it stand. I shouldn't have interfered. I shook my head. You didn't interfere. You told the truth. I smiled at both of them. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to be someone else's version of successful. And it feels right. This calls for celebration, Uncle David declared. Dinner's on me. I know a place with excellent desserts and no judgment. As we walked away from the ceremony, my cap tilted at a rebellious angle, I realized something important. The ache of my parents' disapproval hadn't disappeared. It might never fully vanish. But it no longer defined me. It was just one discordant note in a symphony that was, increasingly, my own composition. That dinner at Maury's Japanese restaurant became our new graduation tradition. Uncle David ordered champagne and insisted on a toast. To Mia Chen, he said, raising his glass, who had the courage to choose her own path. Alex clinked his glass against mine, eyes crinkling with genuine pride. For the first time, celebration didn't feel like an act, it felt deserved. Later that evening, as we walked along the waterfront, streetlights reflecting on the harbor, Alex asked the question I'd been avoiding. Will you try to reconcile with your parents? I watched a ferry glide across the dark water, its windows glowing like fireflies. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to. Another part wonders if that's just old programming, the need for their approval that I've spent 4 years trying to unlearn. Uncle David, walking slightly ahead, turned back. There's no timeline for healing, kiddo. Some relationships need distance before they can find new ground. He was right, as usual. But distance doesn't necessarily create clarity, especially when you've spent your whole life viewing yourself through someone else's expectations. The Monday after graduation, I started my new role at Vertex. My office, an actual office with a door that closed, overlooked the city skyline. My name on the door. My team of 4 analysts waiting for direction. Imposter syndrome hit me. Like a physical wave as I stood in the doorway that first morning, gripping my coffee cup too tightly. "You belong here," Alex said, appearing beside me. "Remember that when the doubt creeps in." I nodded, squared my shoulders, and stepped through the doorway. The first months passed in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and late nights. I developed our data intelligence approach from the ground up, integrating systems that had previously existed in silos. My team, initially skeptical of their young director, gradually became allies, then friends. We celebrated small victories with pizza in the conference room, shared frustrations over coffee, built something meaningful together. My personal life, meanwhile, settled into a new rhythm. My apartment slowly transformed from a student crash pad to an actual home, with plants that survived more than a week and artwork on the walls. I started dating again, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. I joined a community orchestra, reconnecting with the violin I'd once played only to please my parents and rediscovering the joy in music for its own sake. Uncle David remained my anchor, Sunday brunches at his place a sacred ritual. He'd expanded the bookstore, adding a small cafe section that had become a neighborhood gathering spot. "Business is good," he'd say with characteristic understatement, though I knew from helping with his taxes just how good it really was. My parents and I maintained a fragile, minimal contact. Birthday calls. Christmas cards. Brief, stilted conversations that never ventured beyond surface pleasantries. I sent them links to articles when Vertex was featured in major publications. They never mentioned seeing them. 6 months after graduation, when the ache had dulled to something manageable, I received an unexpected text from my mother. "Your father had a minor heart attack. He's stable. Memorial Hospital." I called immediately. "I can be there in 3 hours. What do the doctors say?" Her voice was thin, stretched taut with worry. "Blockage in one artery. They put in a stent. He should recover fully, but it was frightening, Mia." "I'm coming," I said, already pulling up flights on my laptop. "I'll text you when I land." I called Alex next, explained the situation. "Take whatever time you need," he said without hesitation. "Family comes first. The team can handle things here." Family comes first. Such a simple statement, yet it landed like a stone in still water, ripples expanding outward. What did family mean when your relationship had been reduced to obligation and performance? When the people who should know you best seemed determined to see only what you weren't? The flight to Portland gave me 3 hours to wrestle with those questions. By the time I landed, I still had no answers, only a resolve to be present without expectation, for my mother's sake if nothing else. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and wilting flowers. My mother sat alone in the waiting area, looking smaller than I remembered, her normally perfect hair slightly disheveled. When she saw me, something in her face cracked open. Relief, exhaustion, a flash of something that might have been regret. "Mia," she said, standing. "You didn't have to come." Of course I did. I set down my overnight bag. "How is he?" "Resting. They say he'll be able to go home tomorrow." She hesitated, then added, "He doesn't know I called you." Of course. He didn't. My father would rather suffer in silence than admit vulnerability, especially to the daughter who had defied him. "That's okay," I said. "I'm here for both of you." She led me to his room. He lay against white pillows, looking ashen and older than his 58 years. Various monitors beeped softly, tracking his vital signs. For a moment, seeing him so diminished, all the complicated history between us receded. He was just my dad, mortal and fragile. His eyes opened as we entered, widening slightly when he saw me. "Mia," he said, voice rough. "You didn't need to come all this way." The same words as my mother, but with a different weight behind them. Still, there was no anger in his tone, just weariness and perhaps a touch of embarrassment at being seen in this state. "I wanted to," I said simply. "How are you feeling?" "Like an elephant is sitting on my chest," he admitted. "But the doctors say I'll live." I pulled up a chair beside his bed. "Good. Because I have a lot more years of disappointing you planned." The joke hung in the air for a moment, dangerous and electric. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, rusty sound, but genuine. "Touché." My mother excused herself to get coffee, leaving us alone. The silence stretched between us, not Exactly comfortable but not hostile either. Your company, he finally said. It's doing well? I nodded. We're growing faster than projected. Opening an East Coast office next quarter. And you're happy there? The question caught me off guard. In all our years together, I couldn't remember my father ever asking about my happiness, only my achievement, my status, my conformity to his plan. Yes, I said cautiously. I love the work. The team. The mission. He nodded once, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Your grandmother, my mother, wanted me to be a doctor. Did you know that? I shook my head, surprised by this sudden revelation. She was a nurse. Worked double shifts to put me through college. When I chose finance instead, she didn't speak to me for 2 years. His mouth twitched. I've become her, haven't I? The admission hung in the antiseptic air, fragile as a soap bubble. I didn't rush to contradict him or to pile on agreement. Instead, I reached for his hand, the hand that had signed my report cards, pointed out my flaws, sometimes rested briefly on my shoulder in those rare moments of almost approval. We have time to do better, I said quietly. His fingers tightened around mine briefly before letting go. Perhaps. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement, a crack in the foundation that had seemed so impenetrable before. When my mother returned, she found us in companionable silence, the TV on mute showing a baseball game neither of us was watching. I stayed 3 days, helping my mother prepare the house for my father's return, taking her grocery shopping, sitting with him during visiting hours. We didn't have any more breakthrough conversations, but the hostility that had characterized our interactions since my college decision had softened into something quieter, not warmth exactly, but the absence of active cold. When it was time for me to fly back, my mother hugged me tightly at the airport. Thank you for coming, she whispered. It meant more than you know. Call me, I said. Not just for emergencies. She nodded, blinking rapidly. We could visit sometime. See your office? If that would be all right. I'd like that, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Back in Seattle, life resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted internally. The hollow ache that had accompanied thoughts of my parents for so long had changed shape. It hadn't disappeared, but it no longer felt like a void that could never be filled, just a tender spot that needed gentle handling. 2 weeks after I returned, Alex called me into his office. How's your father? Recovering. Following doctor's orders for once in his life. Good. He shuffled some papers on his desk, uncharacteristically hesitant. Mia, I need to ask you something important. My stomach dropped. In the corporate world, conversations that begin this way rarely end well. Is something wrong with my work? What? No. He looked genuinely shocked. Quite the opposite. The board was impressed with how smoothly your team ran even while you were away. It demonstrated the strength of the systems you've built. I relaxed slightly. That's good to hear. There's an opportunity, he continued. Our East Coast expansion is moving faster than anticipated. We need someone to head up the Boston office, someone who understands our culture and methodology, but can also build something new from the ground up. He met my eyes. I think it should be you. I stared at him, processing. You want me to move to Boston? It would be a significant promotion. Chief Data Officer for the entire East Coast. Operation. More responsibility, more visibility, substantially higher compensation. He pushed a folder across the desk. All the details are in there. But I want to be clear, if you prefer to stay in Seattle, there's plenty of growth opportunity here. 2. This isn't an ultimatum. I took the folder, mind racing. How long do I have to decide? 2 weeks. And Mia? His expression softened. This isn't me trying to get rid of you. This is me recognizing that you're ready for more than I can offer you here right now. At home that night, I spread the offer details across my kitchen table. The salary made me dizzy, more money than I'd ever imagined earning, especially at 26. The role was everything I'd been working toward: strategic leadership, autonomy, the chance to build something from scratch. But Boston meant leaving Seattle. Leaving Uncle David. Leaving the community I'd carefully constructed after breaking away from my parents. It meant starting over again in a city where I knew no one, where winter lasted 6 months, where I'd be even further from Portland. I called Uncle David. They're offering me Boston, I said without preamble. The promotion? That's fantastic. His enthusiasm faded when I didn't immediately respond. Isn't it? It's an amazing opportunity. But it's across the country. Away from you, away from everything I've built here. Ah. He was quiet for a moment. And you're worried about leaving your support system. Among other things. Mia, he said gently, I love having you nearby. Our brunches are the highlight of my week. But I would never want to be the reason you play small. This isn't about playing small, I protested. It's about quality of life. Community. Belonging. All of which you can build again, he pointed out. You've done it before, under much more difficult circumstances. And this time, you'd be doing it from a position of strength, not desperation. He was right, of course. But another concern lurked beneath the surface, one I was almost embarrassed to voice. I'm also thinking about my parents, I admitted. We've just started to rebuild something. If I move even further away. Uncle David's voice softened. Healing doesn't depend on proximity, kiddo. If they're sincere about reconnecting, distance won't stop that. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the lights of the city, turning the decision over in my mind. The rational choice was clear: take the promotion, move to Boston, advance my career. But decisions aren't made by logic alone. That weekend, I drove to Portland, not to see my parents, but to visit my old university campus. I walked the familiar paths, sat in the courtyard where I'd studied during rare sunny days, past the computer lab where I'd pulled countless all-nighters. This place had given me more than an education, it had given me the first taste of self-determination. I found myself outside Professor Kaminsky's office. Her door was open, light spilling into the hallway. I knocked softly on the frame. She looked up, glasses perched on her nose, and her face brightened with recognition. Ms. Chen. What a pleasant surprise. I hope I'm not interrupting, I said, suddenly unsure why I'd come. Not at all. Please, sit. She cleared a stack of papers from the chair opposite her desk. I've been following Vertex's success. Your success, specifically. I smiled. You keep track of your former students? Only the exceptional ones. Her direct gaze hadn't changed. But I suspect you didn't come here for compliments. What's on your mind? I explained the situation, the promotion, the move, the uncertainty. She listened without interrupting, fingers steepled beneath her chin. You know, she said when I finished, most of my students are obsessed with making the right decision. As if there's a single correct answer to any significant life choice. She leaned back in her chair. But that's rarely the case. There are just different paths, each with its own constellation of possibilities. So how do I choose? By recognizing that the question isn't what's the right decision? But rather, who do I want to become? She smiled slightly. The Mia Chen who stays in Seattle will be a different person from the Mia Chen who moves to Boston. Neither version is wrong. They're just different stories. I thought about that on the drive back to Seattle. Different stories. Different versions. Of myself, unfolding in parallel universes. The Seattle Mia, comfortable, supported, climbing steadily. The Boston Mia, challenged, autonomous, accelerating rapidly. Who did I want to become? The answer came to me not in a flash of insight but in a quiet certainty that settled over me like gentle rain. I'd spent my childhood constrained by my parents' limited vision for me. I'd spent my college years breaking free of those constraints. Now I had the chance to expand beyond what even I had imagined for myself. I called Alex the next morning. I'm accepting the position, I said when he answered. I'll move to Boston. His whoop of excitement made me hold the phone away from my ear. That's fantastic news. The team there will be lucky to have you. I have one condition, I added. I want to build my own team. I want to bring at least 2 people from Seattle who understand our methodology. Done, he said without hesitation. Whatever you need to succeed. The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. I found an apartment in Cambridge with big windows and walking distance to the new office. I identified the team members I wanted to bring east. I began the painful process of selling furniture that wouldn't make the cross-country journey. Uncle David helped me pack, wrapping photo frames in bubble wrap with the same care he used for rare books at his store. You'll come back for Christmas, he said, not a question but a statement. And Thanksgiving, I promised. And random weekends. When I miss you too much. My parents' response to the news was more complex. My mother called the day after I told them, her voice wavering between pride and concern. Boston is so far, she said. And the winters are brutal. I'll buy a good coat, I assured her. Your father's worried about the stress. After what happened with his heart? Mom, I interrupted gently, are you asking me not to go? A long pause. No, she finally said. No, I'm not. I'm trying to be a mother who worries the right amount. I'm not very practiced at it. The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. You're doing fine, I said softly. 2 days before my flight, they drove to Seattle. We met at a restaurant near my nearly empty apartment, neutral territory for us all. My father looked better than he had in the hospital, color returned to his face, though he moved more carefully than before. The cardiologist says I'm healing well, he said when I asked. Another month and I can start normal activity again. Good, I said, genuinely relieved. I'm glad to hear it. We ordered dinner, navigating the early moments with careful small talk. As the entrees arrived, my father cleared his throat. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it on the table between us. I looked at him questioningly. Open it, my mother encouraged. Inside was a delicate gold compass pendant on a fine chain. The face was mother of pearl, the cardinal directions marked in tiny gold letters. It was my grandmother's, my father explained, his voice gruff. She gave it to me when I left for college. Said it would help me find my way when the path wasn't clear. I lifted it carefully from the box, watching the light play across its surface. I should have given it to you when you left for school, he continued. But I was. He paused, searching for words. Stubborn? My mother suggested with gentle irony. Wrong, he said simply. I was wrong, Mia. About Harvard. About the path you chose. About many things. The admission hung in the air. Between us, more valuable than the heirloom in my hands. I swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in my throat. Boston is a chance to build something significant, he continued. Your mother and I want you to know that we're proud of you. Not despite the choices you've made, but because of them. I fastened the compass around my neck, feeling its weight settle against my collarbone. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate for the emotions behind them. I'll keep it with me always. After dinner, standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, my mother hugged me tightly. Call when you land, she said. And when you're settled. And whenever you want to talk. I will, I promised. My father's embrace was briefer but no less sincere. Trust your compass, he said quietly. It hasn't led you wrong yet. As I watched them drive away, I touched the pendant at my throat. Not a perfect reconciliation, there were still fragile places between us, conversations yet to be had, hurts not fully healed. But a beginning. A new chapter in a story that was still being written. The night before my flight, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by the last few boxes I'd hand carry with me. Among them was a small photo album Uncle David had given me at our goodbye dinner. A little piece of home to take with you, he'd said. I opened it now, smiling at the first photo, me at 18, standing in front of his bookstore on my first day of work, looking terrified and determined in equal measure. The next showed us at my college graduation, both grinning broadly. Then came snapshots of Sunday brunches, holiday celebrations, quiet moments in his garden, a visual history of the family we'd chosen to be for each other. The final page held a photo I didn't recognize, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on a porch swing, deeply absorbed in a book too big for her small hands. My younger self, captured in a moment of pure concentration. Beneath it, Uncle David had written, "You've always known how to lose yourself in possibilities. Boston is just another good book waiting to be read." I traced my finger over his handwriting, feeling a surge of gratitude for this man who had taught me what unconditional support really meant. Tomorrow I would board a plane, fly across the country, and begin again in a city of strangers. I would build a new team, establish new routines, create new connections. But I wouldn't be starting from nothing this time. I'd be carrying with me the lessons of Seattle, the wisdom of Uncle David, the hard-won insights from my parents, and the confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of achieving. The compass around my neck wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a reminder that sometimes the path forward requires leaving something behind, not in rejection or anger, but in growth and evolution. The needle might waver, but it always finds true north eventually. That night, I slept peacefully. On my makeshift bed of blankets, surrounded by the empty spaces where my furniture had been. But it's across the country. Away from you, away from everything I've built here. Ah. He was quiet for a moment. And you're worried about leaving your support system. Among other things. Mia, he said gently, I love having you nearby. Our brunches are the highlight of my week. But I would never want to be the reason you play small. This isn't about playing small, I protested. It's about quality of life. Community. Belonging. All of which you can build again, he pointed out. You've done it before, under much more difficult circumstances. And this time, you'd be doing it from a position of strength, not desperation. He was right, of course. But another concern lurked beneath the surface, one I was almost embarrassed to voice. I'm also thinking about my parents, I admitted. We've just started to rebuild something. If I move even further away. Uncle David's voice softened. Healing doesn't depend on proximity, kiddo. If they're sincere about reconnecting, distance won't stop that. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the lights of the city, turning the decision over in my mind. The rational choice was clear: take the promotion, move to Boston, advance my career. But decisions aren't made by logic alone. That weekend, I drove to Portland, not to see my parents, but to visit my old university campus. I walked the familiar paths, sat in the courtyard where I'd studied during rare sunny days, past the computer lab where I'd pulled countless all-nighters. This place had given me more than an education, it had given me the first taste of self-determination. I found myself outside Professor Kaminsky's office. Her door was open, light spilling into the hallway. I knocked softly on the frame. She looked up, glasses perched on her nose, and her face brightened with recognition. Ms. Chen. What a pleasant surprise. I hope I'm not interrupting, I said, suddenly unsure why I'd come. Not at all. Please, sit. She cleared a stack of papers from the chair opposite her desk. I've been following Vertex's success. Your success, specifically. I smiled. You keep track of your former students? Only the exceptional ones. Her direct gaze hadn't changed. But I suspect you didn't come here for compliments. What's on your mind? I explained the situation, the promotion, the move, the uncertainty. She listened without interrupting, fingers steepled beneath her chin. You know, she said when I finished, most of my students are obsessed with making the right decision. As if there's a single correct answer to any significant life choice. She leaned back in her chair. But that's rarely the case. There are just different paths, each with its own constellation of possibilities. So how do I choose? By recognizing that the question isn't what's the right decision? But rather, who do I want to become? She smiled slightly. The Mia Chen who stays in Seattle will be a different person from the Mia Chen who moves to Boston. Neither version is wrong. They're just different stories. I thought about that on the drive back to Seattle. Different stories. Different versions. Of myself, unfolding in parallel universes. The Seattle Mia, comfortable, supported, climbing steadily. The Boston Mia, challenged, autonomous, accelerating rapidly. Who did I want to become? The answer came to me not in a flash of insight but in a quiet certainty that settled over me like gentle rain. I'd spent my childhood constrained by my parents' limited vision for me. I'd spent my college years breaking free of those constraints. Now I had the chance to expand beyond what even I had imagined for myself. I called Alex the next morning. I'm accepting the position, I said when he answered. I'll move to Boston. His whoop of excitement made me hold the phone away from my ear. That's fantastic news. The team there will be lucky to have you. I have one condition, I added. I want to build my own team. I want to bring at least 2 people from Seattle who understand our methodology. Done, he said without hesitation. Whatever you need to succeed. The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. I found an apartment in Cambridge with big windows and walking distance to the new office. I identified the team members I wanted to bring east. I began the painful process of selling furniture that wouldn't make the cross-country journey. Uncle David helped me pack, wrapping photo frames in bubble wrap with the same care he used for rare books at his store. You'll come back for Christmas, he said, not a question but a statement. And Thanksgiving, I promised. And random weekends. When I miss you too much. My parents' response to the news was more complex. My mother called the day after I told them, her voice wavering between pride and concern. Boston is so far, she said. And the winters are brutal. I'll buy a good coat, I assured her. Your father's worried about the stress. After what happened with his heart. Mom, I interrupted gently, are you asking me not to go? A long pause. No, she finally said. No, I'm not. I'm trying to be a mother who worries the right amount. I'm not very practiced at it. The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. You're doing fine, I said softly. 2 days before my flight, they drove to Seattle. We met at a restaurant near my nearly empty apartment, neutral territory for us all. My father looked better than he had in the hospital, color returned to his face, though he moved more carefully than before. The cardiologist says I'm healing well, he said when I asked. Another month and I can start normal activity again. Good, I said, genuinely relieved. I'm glad to hear it. We ordered dinner, navigating the early moments with careful small talk. As the entrees arrived, my father cleared his throat. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it on the table between us. I looked at him questioningly. Open it, my mother encouraged. Inside was a delicate gold compass pendant on a fine chain. The face was mother of pearl, the cardinal directions marked in tiny gold letters. It was my grandmother's, my father explained, his voice gruff. She gave it to me when I left for college. Said it would help me find my way when the path wasn't clear. I lifted it carefully from the box, watching the light play across its surface. I should have given it to you when you left for school, he continued. But I was. He paused, searching for words. Stubborn? My mother suggested with gentle irony. Wrong, he said simply. I was wrong, Mia. About Harvard. About the path you chose. About many things. The admission hung in the air. Between us, more valuable than the heirloom in my hands. I swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in my throat. Boston is a chance to build something significant, he continued. Your mother and I want you to know that we're proud of you. Not despite the choices you've made, but because of them. I fastened the compass around my neck, feeling its weight settle against my collarbone. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate for the emotions behind them. I'll keep it with me always. After dinner, standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, my mother hugged me tightly. Call when you land, she said. And when you're settled. And whenever you want to talk. I will, I promised. My father's embrace was briefer but no less sincere. Trust your compass, he said quietly. It hasn't led you wrong yet. As I watched them drive away, I touched the pendant at my throat. Not a perfect reconciliation, there were still fragile places between us, conversations yet to be had, hurts not fully healed. But a beginning. A new chapter in a story that was still being written. The night before my flight, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by the last few boxes I'd hand carry with me. Among them was a small photo album Uncle David had given me at our goodbye dinner. A little piece of home to take with you, he'd said. I opened it now, smiling at the first photo, me at 18, standing in front of his bookstore on my first day of work, looking terrified and determined in equal measure. The next showed us at my college graduation, both grinning broadly. Then came snapshots of Sunday brunches, holiday celebrations, quiet moments in his garden, a visual history of the family we'd chosen to be for each other. The final page held a photo I didn't recognize, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on a porch swing, deeply absorbed in a book too big for her small hands. My younger self, captured in a moment of pure concentration. Beneath it, Uncle David had written, "You've always known how to lose yourself in possibilities. Boston is just another good book waiting to be read." I traced my finger over his handwriting, feeling a surge of gratitude for this man who had taught me what unconditional support really meant. Tomorrow I would board a plane, fly across the country, and begin again in a city of strangers. I would build a new team, establish new routines, create new connections. But I wouldn't be starting from nothing this time. I'd be carrying with me the lessons of Seattle, the wisdom of Uncle David, the hard-won insights from my parents, and the confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of achieving. The compass around my neck wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a reminder that sometimes the path forward requires leaving something behind, not in rejection or anger, but in growth and evolution. The needle might waver, but it always finds true north eventually. That night, I slept peacefully. On my makeshift bed of blankets, surrounded by the empty spaces where my furniture had been. In the morning, I would step onto a plane and into the next chapter of my story, not the one my parents had once written for me, not even the one I had carefully outlined for myself, but something new and uncharted and entirely mine to discover. Boston greeted me with a crisp September breeze that hinted at the famous New England autumn to come. My apartment in Cambridge overlooked the Charles River, where rowers glided through morning mist like water insects. I stood on my balcony that first morning, coffee warming my hands, and felt both the thrill and terror of new beginnings washing over me. The Vertex Boston office occupied 3 floors of a renovated textile factory in Kendall Square. Exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, and enormous windows, beautiful but empty, waiting to be filled with purpose and people. As I walked through the vacant space that would soon house my team, my footsteps echoed against the high ceilings. "What do you think?" Alex had flown in for the week to help with the transition. He stood in the doorway of what would be my office, watching me take it all in. "It's perfect," I said, running my hand along the edge of my new desk. "Intimidating? But perfect." He smiled. "Remember how you felt walking into your first office in Seattle? This is the same, just on a larger scale. You were ready then. You're ready now." I wasn't so sure, but I nodded anyway. The 2 team members I'd brought from Seattle, Raj and Taylor, would arrive next week. The rest of the team, 15 positions in total, were mine to hire and build from scratch. The responsibility was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. That night, alone in my half-furnished apartment, I video-called Uncle David. "How was day 1?" he asked, his familiar face slightly pixelated on my laptop screen. "Overwhelming," I admitted. "The office is beautiful but empty. It's like a blank canvas where I'm supposed to create a masterpiece, but I'm not sure if I even know how to hold the brush properly." He chuckled. "If I recall correctly, you said almost the exact same thing your first day of college. And look how that turned out." I smiled, relaxing a fraction. "True. But this feels different. In college, I was only responsible for myself. Now I have an entire team depending on my leadership. All the more reason to trust yourself," he said. "You've never been someone who shrinks from a challenge, Mia. Remember when you were 10 and decided to enter that citywide chess tournament, even though you'd only been playing for 6 months? You studied every night for weeks." I laughed. "And still came in second to last place. But you played every match to the end," he countered. "No resignations, no tears. That's the Mia Chen I know, persistent in the face of uncertainty." After we hung up, I unpacked a box of books I'd shipped ahead, arranging them on the built-in shelves that had partly sold me on the apartment. My fingers lingered on a worn copy of The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, Uncle David's gift on my 20th birthday. Inside the cover, he'd written, "The only thing that makes the journey worthwhile is the willingness to be changed by it." I was counting on that being true. The first month passed in a blur of hiring interviews, strategy meetings, and late nights. I established a routine: early morning runs along the river, coffee from the corner cafe where they quickly learned my order, 12-hour workdays, and takeout eaten at my desk more often than not. I interviewed 67 candidates to fill 13 positions, seeking not just technical skills but the right blend of creativity, adaptability, and collaborative spirit. Slowly, the empty office began to fill, not just with desks and equipment, but with voices, ideas, momentum. Raj and Taylor helped train the new hires, bridging Seattle's established methodologies with Boston's fresh energy. We landed our first major East Coast client, then our second. Small victories that built confidence and cohesion. But building a professional life was only half the equation. My personal world remained largely empty. I knew no one in Boston outside of work. Weekends stretched before me like blank pages I wasn't sure how to fill. I explored museums alone, ate at restaurant bars with a book for company, and tried not to feel the sharp edge of isolation that came with night's quiet hours. "You need to meet people," Taylor told me bluntly over lunch in mid-October. "Normal people. Outside of work." I frowned. "I meet people all the time. Clients, vendors, colleagues, that's not what I mean and you know it." She pushed her salad around her plate. "Join a club. Take a class. Download a dating app. Something." She was right, of course. I'd been using work as both shield and excuse, pouring all my energy into the office to avoid confronting the emptiness of my apartment. The same pattern I'd fallen into during those first difficult months after leaving my parents' house: work as refuge, accomplishment as distraction. That weekend, I forced myself to break the cycle. I found a community orchestra that welcomed amateur musicians, dusted off my violin, and attended my first rehearsal in years. My fingers were clumsy on the strings at first, muscle memory slow to return, but by the end of the session, something had loosened in my chest, a tightness I hadn't fully acknowledged until it began to release. First time back after a break? The woman beside me, a violinist in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around her eyes, packed up her instrument as she spoke. I nodded. That obvious? You had that look, terrified. At first, then surprised when it started coming back to you. She extended her hand. Ellen Novak. Violinist, high school math teacher, and maker of the best apple pie in Massachusetts, according to my completely unbiased children. I laughed, shaking her hand. Mia Chen. Data analyst, recent Seattle transplant, and consumer of far too much takeout. Well, Mia Chen, a few of us usually grab drinks after rehearsal. You're welcome to join. That simple invitation led to my first real social connection in Boston. Ellen's warmth and straightforward kindness reminded me of Uncle David. Her husband, Mark, a software engineer with a dry wit, joined us later at the bar, along with 3 other orchestra members. They asked about Seattle, offered recommendations for surviving my first Boston winter, and didn't probe when I kept my family history vague. Next week, dinner at our place before rehearsal, Ellen insisted as we parted. No more takeout for you. At least not on Thursdays. I accepted, surprised by how much I was looking forward to it already. As fall deepened into winter, my world expanded in concentric circles. Work continued to thrive, we exceeded quarterly targets, built innovative systems for clients, established Vertex Boston as a significant player in the region's tech ecosystem. My team developed a comfortable rhythm, personalities meshing better than I could have hoped. My friendship with Ellen and Mark grew into a weekly constant. Thursday dinners at their cozy Somerville home became sacred time, no work calls. No emails, just conversation and connection over home-cooked meals. Their college-aged kids sometimes joined when home on break, folding me into family debates about movies and politics with easy acceptance. You should come for Thanksgiving, Ellen mentioned casually one evening in early November. We always have strays at our table. I smiled at the term but shook my head. I've already booked flights to Portland. Spending the holiday with my uncle. What I didn't mention was that my parents would also be there, our first holiday together since before college. Uncle David had orchestrated it with diplomatic skill, creating neutral ground for this tentative new phase of our relationship. Christmas, then, Ellen persisted. Unless you're heading west again? I hesitated. Actually, my parents might visit me here. It's still being negotiated. She nodded, not pressing for details. That was one of the things I appreciated most about Ellen, her respect for boundaries, her understanding that some stories unfold slowly. The week before Thanksgiving, as I prepared to fly to Portland, Alex called with unexpected news. The investors are impressed with Boston's performance, he said without preamble. They want to accelerate our expansion plans. We're looking at opening a Chicago office in the spring. That's fantastic, I said, genuinely excited. Who will you tap to lead it? A pause. Actually, the board suggested you. I nearly dropped my phone. Me? But Boston is barely established. We've only been operational for 3 months. Which is why this is a testament to your leadership, he countered. The foundation you've built is already solid enough that the board believes the team could continue under Raj's management while you launch Chicago. My mind raced with implications. Another move. Another new beginning. Another round of hiring. And building from scratch. The prospect was both flattering and exhausting. This isn't a decision you need to make immediately, Alex continued. Take the holiday. Think about it. We'll talk when you're back. I hung up feeling unmoored. Just as Boston was beginning to feel like somewhere I could belong, I was being offered the chance to leave. Success creating its own kind of instability. The flight to Portland gave me 5 hours of enforced reflection. As the landscape below shifted from urban grid to mountain ranges, I turned the Chicago opportunity over in my mind like a complex equation seeking solution. The professional advantages were clear: accelerated advancement, increased responsibility, another impressive addition to my resume. But the personal costs were equally evident: starting over again, leaving the fragile roots I'd just begun to establish, delaying the sense of home I'd been seeking. Uncle David met me at the airport, wrapping me in a bear hug that smelled of book dust and cinnamon. There she is, Boston's brightest star. I laughed, tension easing from my shoulders at the familiar comfort of his presence. Hardly. But it's going well. He loaded my suitcase into his car, the same reliable Subaru he'd driven for years. Your parents are coming for dinner tomorrow. Your mother's made 3 different pies because she couldn't remember which was your favorite. Apple, I said automatically. It's always been apple. He smiled. I know that. You know that. But her making 3 pies isn't really about pie, is it? I understood what he meant. It was about effort. About caring enough to compensate for not knowing. About trying. How are they? I asked as we drove through Portland's rain-slicked streets. Really? Nervous, he answered honestly. Excited. Your father's been reading about data analytics. I think he's trying to understand your world better. Something warm and unexpected bloomed in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, that had been a long, ongoing process, but appreciation for the attempt, however belated. Uncle David's house welcomed me with the same comfort it always had, books stacked on every surface, the faint scent of pipe tobacco though he'd quit smoking years ago, mismatched furniture chosen for comfort rather than style. I slept better that night than I had in months, lulled by the familiar sound of rain against the windows and the absolute certainty of being exactly where I belonged. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. I helped Uncle David prepare the turkey, chopping vegetables and kneading dough for rolls with the easy synchronicity of long practice. We didn't talk about Chicago, I hadn't told him yet, still processing the possibility myself. Instead, we discussed his bookstore, my orchestra adventures, the novel he was finally writing after years of encouragement from me. My parents arrived. At 3 o'clock, the precise time they'd been invited. My mother carried a bakery box containing the promised 3 pies. My father brought wine, a good Cabernet, not the cheap Merlot he'd always preferred. Small changes that signaled effort. Mia, my mother said, embracing me carefully, as if I might disappear if held too tightly. You look wonderful. Boston agrees with you. The job keeps me busy, I said, accepting the box of pies. But yes, I'm enjoying it. My father stood awkwardly in the entryway, hands in his pockets. The Red Sox had a good season, he offered. Not that I follow baseball much, but I thought you might have become a fan, living there. It was such a dad thing to say, attempting connection through sports, that I had to smile. I haven't been to a game yet, but my colleague Raj is obsessed. He has season tickets. Maybe next summer, he suggested. When your mother and I visit. The casual assumption of future plans that included me, felt like an olive branch extended across a wide divide. I'd like that, I said. Sincerely. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Uncle David's gift for conversation bridged awkward moments. We talked about safe topics, Boston's historic sites, my mother's volunteer work at the hospital, Uncle David's bookstore expansion plans. My father asked thoughtful questions about my role at Vertex, demonstrating that he had indeed been researching the industry. The technology is beyond me, he admitted. But the business principles translate. Growth strategies, market differentiation, competitive advantage, those fundamentals cross sectors. That's exactly right, I said, warming to the subject. The tech is just a tool. The real value is in how we apply it to solve business problems. As Uncle David served pie, apple for me, pecan for my father, pumpkin for himself, and tiny slices of all 3 for my mother, a comfortable silence settled over the table. Not the tense silence of things unsaid, but the quiet of people who had, perhaps, said enough for now. Later, as we cleared dishes, my mother touched my arm. We've been thinking, she said hesitantly. The guest room at home, your old room. It's still full of your things. Would you want to go through it while you're here? Keep what matters, let go of what doesn't? The offer contained multitudes, acknowledgement that my past belonged to me, recognition that I had moved forward, acceptance that my future was my own to shape. But also, perhaps, hope that I might want to visit more often, might need a space that felt like mine in their home again. I'd like that, I said. Maybe Saturday? She nodded, relief evident in her smile. Saturday would be perfect. After my parents left, Uncle David and I sat on his porch swing, bundled in blankets against the November chill, mugs of spiced cider warming our hands. Stars pricked the clear sky above, unusually visible for the city. They're trying, I said. Quietly. Yes, he agreed. Not perfectly. But genuinely. I took a deep breath, the cold air sharp in my lungs. Alex offered me Chicago. Uncle David turned to look at me, eyebrows raised. Another promotion? Impressive. It would mean moving again. Starting over. Just when Boston is beginning to feel like somewhere I could belong. He was quiet for a moment, rocking the swing gently with one foot. What does belonging mean to you, Mia? Is it a place? People? Achievement? What anchors you? The question cut to the heart of my dilemma. I don't know, I admitted. For so long, belonging meant meeting expectations, my parents' expectations. Then it became defying those expectations, proving I could succeed on my own terms. But now you're writing your own definitions, he finished for me. Trying to, I corrected. But it's hard to know what I want when opportunities keep expanding faster than I can process them. Chicago would be another step up. Another accomplishment. But accomplishment isn't the same as fulfillment, he said gently. I nodded, something tight easing in my chest at having the feeling named so precisely. When does ambition become an end in itself? A hamster wheel I can't get off? He smiled. That's the question, isn't it? And one only you can answer. Saturday morning, I drove to my parents' house alone, the first time I'd been there since leaving for college. The neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered, the houses more weathered. My father opened the door before I could knock, as if he'd been watching for my car. Coffee's ready, he said by way of greeting. Your mother's already started sorting things in your room. I told her to wait, but he shrugged, a gesture that contained years of experience with my mother's inability to sit still when nervous. The house smelled the same, my mother's lemon cleaning solution, the faint mustiness of the heating vents, my father's aftershave. Familiar but distant, like a song I once knew all the words to but now could only hum the melody. My mother appeared in the hallway, hands clasped at her waist. I hope you don't mind. I just thought I'd get some of the obvious things sorted, old school papers, outgrown clothes. It's fine, I assured her. I appreciate the help. My old room had been partially converted to a guest room, but evidence of my adolescence remained, debate trophies on the bookshelf, violin music still on the stand, photographs of high school friends in frames on the dresser. My mother had placed cardboard boxes around the perimeter, labeled, keep, donate, unsure. I'll leave you to it, she said. Unless you'd like help? I hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even me. Actually, I would. If you're offering. We spent the morning excavating the archaeological layers of my youth, report cards and art projects from elementary school. Notebooks filled with teenage poetry, the stuffed rabbit I'd slept with until I was 12. My mother handed me each artifact without judgment, letting me decide its fate. You wrote beautifully, even then, she remarked, paging through a journal. From 9th grade. I never knew. I never showed you, I said quietly. She nodded, accepting this truth without defense. There's a lot I missed, isn't there? Too focused on what I thought you should be to see who you actually were. The admission hung in the air between us, fragile but honest. Yes, I said finally. But I never made it easy. I got so good at hiding anything that didn't fit the perfect daughter image. We created that dynamic together, she acknowledged. But as the parent, the greater responsibility was mine. She set the journal in the keep box. I'm trying to see you clearly now, Mia. I hope it's not too late. I reached for her hand, the hand that had checked my homework, braided my hair, pointed out my flaws, and squeezed it briefly. It's not too late. My father appeared in the doorway with fresh coffee. How's it going in here? We're making progress, my mother said, wiping her eyes quickly. He surveyed the room, nodding at the nearly full keep box. You'll need a bigger suitcase to get all that back to Boston. Actually, I said, making a decision I hadn't planned, I was thinking most of it could stay here. In a corner of the basement, maybe. If that's okay. My father's eyebrows rose slightly. Of course. But wouldn't you want these things in your apartment? My apartment might change, I said carefully. There's a possibility I might move to Chicago in the spring. For work. Another promotion? My mother's voice held a note of pride that once would have been conditional but now seemed genuine. I nodded. Leading another new office. It's a great opportunity professionally, but another upheaval personally, my father finished, surprising me with his perception. Exactly. He considered this, taking a sip of his coffee. You know, When I was offered regional manager for the first time, I turned it down. I stared at him. This was a piece of family history I'd never heard. Why? The timing wasn't right. You were starting middle school. The position would have required significant travel. Your mother had just begun her nursing recertification courses. He shrugged. Career opportunities cycle back around if you're patient. Family moments don't. Coming from the man who had spent my childhood lamenting career sacrifices, this perspective shift was startling. I thought advancement was always the priority, I said carefully. I thought so too, for too long. His mouth quirked in a half-smile. Heart attacks have a way of clarifying priorities. We finished sorting my room by mid-afternoon. The keep box had been repacked for storage, the donate items loaded into my father's car to drop off later, the unsure category largely eliminated through deliberate choices. My childhood had been distilled to its essence, the parts worth preserving separated from those better released. As I prepared to leave, my mother pressed a small package into my hands. A late graduation gift, she explained. Something I should have given you years ago. In the car, I opened it, a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny silver violin. The card read simply, "For the music you make in the world. Love, Mom and Dad." Driving back to Uncle David's, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was resolved, there were still tender spots, unspoken hurts, patterns that would take time to fully transform. But because I had glimpsed the possibility of a new kind of relationship with my parents, one built on who we were becoming rather than who we had been. That night, I made my decision about Chicago. The path forward wasn't about climbing ever higher or moving ever onward. Sometimes it was about deepening where I stood, building foundations strong enough to weather whatever came next. I called Alex from Uncle David's porch, stars bright above, the compass pendant warm against my skin. "I'm not taking Chicago," I said when he answered. "Not now. Boston needs more time." "I need more time." His pause contained surprise but not disappointment. "You're sure?" The board was enthusiastic about your leadership. "I'm sure," I said, certainty settling into my bones. "I want to build something lasting in Boston before expanding further. And honestly, I'm just beginning to feel at home there. I'm not ready to start over again so soon." "I respect that," he said finally. "And between us, I think it's the right call. Your instincts haven't led you wrong yet." After we hung up, I remained on the porch, watching my breath cloud in the night air. Uncle David joined me, draping an extra blanket around my shoulders. "Decision made?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm staying in Boston. Building deeper rather than wider, at least for now." He smiled, unsurprised. "Roots before branches. Seems wise." "It feels right," I agreed. For the first time in a long time, I'm making a choice that isn't about proving something, not to my parents, not to myself, not to the world. Just about what genuinely fulfills me. Uncle David squeezed my shoulder. "That, my dear, is what growing up actually means." The Boston winter arrived with theatrical intensity, swirling snowstorms that transformed the city into a glittering wonderland, followed by winds that cut through even the thickest coats. My first experience with real winter after years in the temperate Northwest was both exhilarating and humbling. I learned quickly, proper boots were non-negotiable, layering was an art form, and the city's famous resilience wasn't just a point of pride but a necessity. "You're adapting well for a West Coast transplant," Ellen remarked one Thursday evening as we trudged through fresh snow toward her house. "Most newcomers spend their first winter hibernating." I laughed, breath clouding in the frigid air. "My secret is stubbornness. I refuse to let weather dictate my life." "That's the Boston spirit," she approved. "No wonder you're fitting in." Fitting in. The phrase settled warmly despite the cold. After declining the Chicago opportunity, I'd committed fully to Boston, not just professionally but personally. I joined a book club through the local library. I volunteered at a weekend coding program for teenage girls. I explored neighborhoods beyond my daily commute, finding hidden bakeries and tiny art galleries tucked between historic buildings. The Vertex Boston office continued to thrive. We landed a major healthcare client in December, developed a groundbreaking predictive model for a retail chain in January, and by February had doubled our initial revenue projections. My team had coalesced into a tight-knit unit, each member's strengths complementing the others in ways I couldn't have engineered if I'd tried. We need to celebrate these wins, I announced one Friday after sharing the quarterly results. Dinner next week, on the company. Significant others welcome. Raj grinned. Chen finally admits we have lives outside this office. Mark your calendars, people, historic moment. The gentle ribbing made me smile. Early in our Boston launch, I'd been so focused on establishing momentum that I'd sometimes forgotten my team were people first, employees second. Finding balance hadn't come naturally, another legacy of my upbringing where achievement always trumped enjoyment. But I was learning. The team dinner became a monthly tradition, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes potluck style in our largest conference room. We celebrated birthdays, work anniversaries, personal milestones. I learned about spouses, children, hobbies, dreams beyond data. The more I invited their whole selves into our workplace, the more innovative and cohesive we became. Alex noticed the difference during his quarterly visit in March. There's something special happening here, he observed as we walked through the office. An energy that's different from Seattle or our other locations. I nodded, watching Taylor explain a complex visualization to our newest analyst, their heads bent together over a monitor. We've become a community, not just a team. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, he said. The board is beyond impressed with Boston's performance. They're talking about using this office as the model for future expansions. Pride warmed me, not just in the professional acknowledgement but in the validation of my decision to stay and build. Choosing depth over advancement had been right for me, for the team, for the company. Uncle David visited in April, when the first green hints of spring softened Boston's edges. I showed him around the office, introduced him to colleagues, took him to my favorite spots in the city. He asked thoughtful questions about my team, remembered details about each person I'd mentioned in our weekly calls, observed everything with his characteristic blend of warmth and perception. You've built something remarkable here, he said. As we walked along the Charles River one evening, cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze. Not just professionally. Your whole life seems aligned. The word resonated. It feels that way, I agreed. For the first time, I'm not compartmentalizing, work Mia separate from personal Mia separate from family Mia. It's all just me. He smiled, eyes crinkling at the corners. Integration is the true mark of adulthood. Not independence or achievement, but bringing all parts of yourself into harmony. When did you get so wise? I teased, linking my arm through his. Oh, about 30 seconds after you were born, he replied easily. Nothing accelerates wisdom like loving someone more than yourself. The evening before he flew back to Portland, Uncle David handed me a small wrapped package. A belated housewarming gift, he explained. Now that you're properly settled. Inside was a brass door knocker, elegantly simple, with my name engraved in flowing script. For your apartment door, he said. A reminder that home isn't just where you live, but where you declare yourself present in the world. I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by this tangible symbol of permanence, of belonging. Thank you for always seeing who I could be, even when I couldn't see it myself. That was the easy part, he said softly. You did the hard work of becoming. 2 weeks after Uncle David's visit, an unexpected email arrived from my father. The subject line read simply, "Visit planning." The body contained flight information for him and my mother, arrival in Boston on the last weekend in May, departure 4 days later, and a brief note, "If this timing works for you, we'd like to see your world there. No pressure if it's not convenient." I stared at the message, processing its significance. This wasn't an obligation visit, not a crisis requiring family gathering. It was a deliberate choice to enter my space, see my life, connect on my territory. The no pressure addendum, so unlike my father's usual approach, particularly struck me. He was offering connection without expectation, leaving room for my agency. I forwarded the message to Uncle David with a simple question, "Progress?" His reply came within minutes, "Definite progress. Remember, healing isn't linear, but this is a significant step." I accepted the visit dates, sending hotel recommendations close to my apartment. My father responded that they'd already booked one of them. "Looking forward to seeing your Boston." He wrote, another acknowledgement that this was my world they were entering, not an extension of theirs. As the visit approached, I felt a curious blend of anticipation and apprehension. My parents had never seen me in my professional element. Never witnessed the life I'd built independently. Part of me, a smaller part than before, but still present, feared their judgment, their measuring of my choices against their own metrics of success. Ellen noticed my distraction during Thursday dinner the week before their arrival. "Nervous about the parental visit?" she asked as we cleared dishes. I smiled ruefully. "That obvious? You've mentioned them exactly twice in 6 months of friendship, and suddenly they're coming to stay. It doesn't take a detective." She handed me a plate to dry. "Complicated relationship?" "Getting less complicated," I said after a moment. "But years of patterns don't change overnight." She nodded, understanding without needing details. "Bring them to Sunday brunch with us, if you'd like. Mark makes excellent waffles, and we excel at buffer conversation." The offer touched me deeply, this chosen family offering to support me with my birth family. "I might take you up on that," I said. "Thank you." My parents' flight arrived precisely on schedule, a detail that made me smile, recognizing the source of my own punctuality. I waited at the arrival's gate, watching the flow of passengers emerge from security. When they appeared, my father in a casual button-down rather than his usual suit, my mother wearing the scarf I'd sent for her birthday, something settled in my chest. They looked older than I remembered from Thanksgiving, but also somehow lighter. "Mia." My mother spotted me first, her face brightening. She embraced me warmly, then held me at arm's length. "You look wonderful. Boston clearly agrees with you." My father followed with an awkward hug, physical affection still new territory between us, and a gruff, "Good to see you, kiddo." The drive to their hotel filled with easy conversation, their flight, the spring weather, recommendations for coffee shops near their accommodation. No interrogation about my work, no subtle digs about career trajectory, no comparison to peers who had chosen more traditional paths. Just simple human connection. "We thought you might show us your office tomorrow," my mother ventured as I pulled up to the hotel entrance. "If that's convenient. We'd like to see where you spend your days." The request, so politely framed, contrasted sharply with how they would have demanded such a tour in the past. "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "The team is looking forward to meeting you." My father's eyebrows rose slightly. "You told your team about us?" "Of course," I said, realizing as I spoke that this transparency was new. In Seattle, I'd kept my family history carefully compartmentalized, sharing little about my background. But in Boston, as I'd integrated other aspects of my life, I'd begun speaking more openly about my parents, not dwelling on past conflicts, but not pretending they didn't exist either. "Nothing too incriminating, I hope," he said, a hint of humor in his voice that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I smiled. "Just the basics. Former banker. Heart attack survivor. Gradually recovering from Harvard disappointment syndrome." He laughed, actually laughed, at the gentle teasing. "Fair enough." The weekend unfolded with surprising ease. I showed them my apartment, where they admired Uncle David's door knocker and the view of the river. We walked the Freedom Trail, visited the Museum of Fine Arts, and ate at my favorite neighborhood restaurants. My father asked thoughtful questions about Boston's economy and history. My mother took photos of everything, including me when she thought I wasn't looking. The office tour on Monday morning felt momentous, worlds colliding in ways I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. I watched my parents take in the exposed brick walls, the collaborative workspace design, the energy of a team in flow. I introduced them to key members, including Raj and Taylor, who greeted them with genuine warmth. "Your daughter is transforming how companies think about data," Raj told my father, professional to professional. "The healthcare model she designed has implications far beyond our current applications." My father nodded, asking intelligent follow-up questions that revealed he'd done research to understand my field. Not to critique, but to connect. In my office, my mother noticed the framed photo on my desk, Uncle David and me at graduation, both grinning broadly. "He's been your constant," she observed quietly. "Yes," I said simply. "He has." "I'm glad," she said, surprising me. "That you had him when we couldn't see past our own expectations." The acknowledgement hung in the air between us, not an apology exactly, but a recognition of truth that felt like one. Alex appeared in my doorway, right on schedule. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen? I'm Alex Mercer, CEO of Vertex Analytics." He extended his hand with the same confident smile he'd offered at graduation. "I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." My father shook his hand firmly. "Your company is doing impressive work. Mia has explained some of the healthcare applications you're developing." "They're largely her vision," Alex replied. Your daughter is one of our most innovative leaders. A proud smile flickered across my father's face, not the smug satisfaction of parental ownership I'd seen directed at others' children, but something quieter, more genuine. She always had her own way of seeing patterns others missed. The comment, this simple recognition of who I had always been rather than who they had tried to shape me into, touched something deep within me. A wound so familiar I'd stopped noticing its ache began, ever so slightly, to heal. Lunch with Alex in the company's rooftop garden space flowed naturally. He shared Vertex's origin story, our mission to make data accessible and actionable for organizations of all sizes. My parents listened attentively, asked insightful questions, engaged as equals rather than judges. You've built something meaningful here, my father said to Alex as we finished dessert. Not just financially successful, but purposeful. That's always been the goal, Alex agreed. Profit matters, but impact matters more. My father nodded thoughtfully. I spent decades focused on the former at the expense of the latter. His eyes met mine briefly. It's a balance I'm still learning. The acknowledgement, so simple yet so profound, nearly took my breath away. Not just the admission of his values shifting, but the implication that he was still growing, still evolving, still becoming. That perhaps his fixed judgments had never been as immutable as they had seemed. After Alex returned to his meetings, I gave my parents a final tour of our development lab, where the team was testing new visualization tools. As we prepared to leave, my father paused by the wall of windows overlooking the city. You made the right choice, he said quietly. Westridge. This company. Boston. All of it. I stood beside him, watching clouds cast moving shadows across the urban landscape. I think so too. I was wrong, he continued, voice steady but vulnerable. About what success looks like. About what you needed. About many things. Dad. I began, but he shook his head slightly. Let me say this, please. He turned to face me fully. When you were born, I thought my job was to give you a perfect life, better than mine, easier, more prestigious. I confused that with giving you a good life. And in trying to shape your path, I nearly destroyed our relationship. My mother joined us, slipping her hand into his. We both did, she added softly. We were so focused on where we wanted you to go that we forgot to see who you already were. I wasn't perfect either, I acknowledged. I shut you out completely rather than fighting for understanding. I made it an all-or-nothing proposition. My father nodded. We all contributed. But as the parents, the greater responsibility was ours. He took a deep breath. What matters now is that we're here, trying to do better. If you'll let us. I want that, I said, the truth of it resonating through me. I've always wanted that. The hug that followed was awkward, three people unused to such physical expressions of emotion learning a new language together. But it was genuine, not a performance of reconciliation but the real, messy beginning of one. That evening, I took them to Ellen and Mark's for dinner, my chosen family meeting my birth family, worlds blending in ways I had never imagined possible. Ellen greeted my parents with her characteristic warmth, Mark poured wine, and conversation flowed with surprising ease. My mother and Ellen discovered a shared passion for gardening. My father and Mark debated baseball statistics good-naturedly. Watching them interact, I felt a curious sense of wholeness, as if pieces of my life that had been carefully kept separate were finally allowed to touch, creating a more complete picture. Later, walking my parents back to their hotel through Boston's lamplit streets, my mother linked her arm through mine. Ellen and Mark are lovely, she said. You found good people here. I have, I agreed. It took time, but Boston feels like home now. Home isn't always where you start, my father observed. Sometimes it's where you finally find yourself. The insight, so unlike his former rigid thinking, caught me by surprise. That's exactly it, I said softly. At the hotel entrance, our goodbye held none of the strained formality of past partings. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "We're so proud of you, Mia. Not for what you've achieved, but for who you are." My father cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. We'd like to visit again. Perhaps in the fall, if that works for you. I'd like that, I said, meaning it completely. Walking back to my apartment alone, the compass pendant warm against my skin, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Not because everything was perfect, there would still be difficult conversations, old patterns that emerged unexpectedly, moments of doubt on all sides. But because we were all, finally, moving in the same direction, toward understanding, toward acceptance, toward love without conditions. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, watching sunrise paint the city gold from my window. Raj appeared in my doorway with coffee, a Tuesday tradition he'd established months ago. "So," he said, settling into the chair opposite my desk. "The famous parents. They seemed not at all like the ogres your stories implied." I laughed. "They've changed. Or maybe I have. Probably both. Growth all around," he observed. "Speaking of which," he slid a folder across my desk. "The board approved our proposal. We're getting the expanded research budget, effective immediately." Excitement coursed through me. "That's fantastic. Have you told the team?" "Waiting for you. It's your vision they bought into." As we gathered the team to share the news, watching their faces light up with possibilities, I felt a surge of gratitude for this path I had chosen, or perhaps this path that had chosen me. The journey from that graduation day, standing frozen, as my father called me a disappointment, to this moment of professional fulfillment and personal integration, had been neither straight nor easy. But every step, even the painful ones, had been necessary. 3 years after that pivotal moment when Alex introduced himself to my stunned parents, I stood at a podium in Vertex's largest conference room, presenting our healthcare analytics platform to a room full of industry leaders and press. The platform, built on algorithms I'd first sketched on a napkin during one of Ellen's Thursday dinners, promised to transform patient care by identifying patterns human observers might miss. As I concluded my presentation to enthusiastic applause, my eyes found familiar faces in the audience, Alex beaming with mentor's pride, Ellen and Mark who had rearranged their schedules to attend, Raj and Taylor who had helped bring the concept to life, Uncle David who had flown in specially, and, in the third row, my parents, applauding with genuine pride. Later, at the reception, my father approached with 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to me. "Remarkable work," he said simply. "You've created something that will help thousands of people." "That was always the goal," I replied, clinking my glass against his. "Impact over accolades." He nodded, understanding the gentle reference to his former values. "The best kind of success," he agreed. "Though I admit, watching my daughter command a room of healthcare executives does produce a certain paternal pride." I laughed. "I'll allow it, just this once." My mother joined us, followed by Uncle David. "The family brain trust," she said, smiling. "All present for Mia's big moment." The phrase, family brain trust, struck me with its simple truth. We had become a family again, not through obligation or performance, but through the harder, braver work of seeing and accepting each other as we actually were. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights reflect on the river. The compass pendant rested in my palm, its weight familiar and comforting. I thought about navigation, how finding your true north isn't a one-time event but a continuous process of adjustment and realignment. My father had once called me a disappointment, believing I had veered off course from the path he had charted. In reality, I had simply found my own compass, my own definition of north, my own understanding of what makes a journey worthwhile. The real disappointment would have been never discovering that I had the right, and the capacity, to choose my own direction. The real failure would have been continuing to measure my worth through someone else's eyes rather than finding the courage to see myself clearly. As I closed my fingers around the pendant, I thought about the young woman standing frozen in her graduation gown, hearing words that seemed to define her. How I wished I could tell her then what I knew now, that disappointment is often just the space between someone else's expectations and your own truth. That the moment when others give up on the version of you they imagined is often the moment you are finally free to become who you actually are. The compass had never been meant to keep me on someone else's path. It had been given to help me find my own, a journey not of distance but of depth, not of achievement but of alignment, not of perfection but of purpose. And standing there, under the vast canvas of stars, I knew with unshakable certainty that I had found my way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.